In the heart of a distant kingdom, where towering spires of ancient stone stretched toward a gray, brooding sky, a child was born under the weight of a prophecy that would haunt the realm for generations. Alara's first cries echoed through the vast hall of the castle, a sound both fragile and fierce, breaking the cold silence that had settled like a shroud over the royal chambers. The air was thick with apprehension as the seers, cloaked figures with eyes clouded by visions of the future, gathered around the newborn princess. Their murmurs, barely audible to those outside the circle, carried the weight of doom. The child would bring ruin to the very kingdom she was destined to rule. The prophecy was not a whisper of hope, but a dark omen etched into the fabric of Alara's life from her very first breath. At her christening, beneath the towering stained glass windows that scattered fractured light across the stone floor, the seers pronounced their verdict with somber certainty. This was no ordinary birth, no joyous herald of peace or prosperity. Instead, Alara was marked by fate as a harbinger of calamity, a force whose coming would shatter the fragile peace that the kingdom clung to so desperately. Yet, in the days that followed, the infant queen was swaddled in innocence, her wide eyes reflecting only the world's wonders and not the shadows cast by whispered fears. Her laughter, soft and unburdened, was a stark contrast to the heavy silences that fell whenever the prophecy was spoken. Despite the growing unease among the court, her parents, King Aldrich and Queen Isolde, clung to hope, shielding their daughter from the darkness foreseen by the seers. They dreamed of a future where Alara's reign would be remembered not for destruction, but for renewal. But hope was a fragile thing in a kingdom teetering on the edge of unrest. The deaths of Aldrich and Isolde came swiftly and without clear cause, plunging the court into chaos. The royal cradle was left empty of parental protection, and at just 6 years old, Alara was thrust upon the throne. The crown she wore was heavy not only with gold and jewels but with the weight of a prophecy that loomed like a storm cloud over her very existence. The innocence of her early years was shattered, replaced by a cold, unyielding reality. The fate of the kingdom rested on the shoulders of a child born to bring ruin. The castle, once filled with the warmth of royal celebration, now echoed with cautious whispers and furtive glances. Nobles who had pledged allegiance in brighter times now regarded the young queen with suspicion. The prophecy had become a weapon in the hands of those eager to see the throne fall, a justification for rebellion and betrayal cloaked beneath courtly smiles. Foreign powers, sensing weakness and opportunity, cast their gaze upon the realm, ready to exploit the turmoil for their own gain. Alara's reign was watched not with hope but with wary anticipation, as if all awaited the moment the prophecy would unfold in full. Within the ancient stone walls, trust was a fragile currency. Advisors and courtiers, once devoted to the crown, now exchanged whispers in shadowed corners, their words laced with doubt and fear. Even the queen's closest attendants bore the weight of uncertainty, their eyes flickering with questions they dared not voice aloud. Who could be trusted when the very future was cursed? The line between ally and adversary blurred, and the court became a labyrinth of intrigue where every smile hid a dagger, every gesture a concealed threat. Alara, still a child in many ways, sensed the undercurrents of suspicion swirling around her. Though too young to grasp the full extent of the prophecy's implications, she felt its cold touch in the wary eyes of those meant to protect her. The crown was a burden heavier than any child should bear, its weight pressing down on her with relentless insistence. Nights were haunted by shadows that whispered secrets she could not understand, and days were spent navigating a world where every step could lead to peril. Yet, beneath the fear and suspicion, the young queen remained a beacon of fragile hope. Her presence was a reminder that even in the darkest prophecies, there was the possibility of defiance. The castle's ancient halls, steeped in history and legend, held stories of rulers who had faced fate and carved their own destinies. Alara's story was just beginning, and though the path ahead was shadowed by doubt and fear, there was within her a spark, a quiet resilience that would not be easily extinguished. The early days of Alara's reign were marked by caution and careful observation. The nobles jockeyed for position, their ambitions masked by courtly grace, while foreign envoys arrived bearing gifts and veiled threats. Each alliance was a delicate dance, Each decision weighed against the possibility of betrayal. The prophecy hung over the throne like a specter, coloring every act of governance with suspicion and dread. Despite the formidable challenges, Elera's youth was not without moments of unexpected tenderness. In the quiet chambers away from prying eyes, she found solace in the stories told by her nursemaid, tales of ancient heroes and wise queens who had overcome impossible odds. These stories kindled a faint but persistent hope within her heart, a belief that perhaps the prophecy could be defied, that ruin was not the only destiny that awaited her. But the court was a place where innocence was a liability, and hope a dangerous folly. The seeds of betrayal were sown early, nurtured by fear and ambition. As Elera grew, so too did the shadows that clung to her reign. Whispers of rebellion and conspiracy began to surface, carried on the lips of those who saw the prophecy not as a warning but as a call to action. The fragile trust that held the kingdom together was unraveling, thread by thread, threatening to plunge the realm into chaos. In this crucible of suspicion and power, Elera stood at the center, a child queen burdened by a fate she did not choose. Her every move was watched, her every word dissected for signs of weakness or malevolence. The prophecy, once a distant murmur, had become a constant companion, a reminder that the future was uncertain and perilous. As the years passed, the kingdom held its breath, caught between hope and despair. Elera's reign was a delicate balance of light and shadow, innocence and experience, trust and betrayal. The young queen's journey had begun not in triumph, but in the heavy silence of prophecy, a silence filled with the echoes of a fate yet to be fulfilled. As Elera edged toward her teenage years, the fragile threads holding her kingdom together began to fray beneath the relentless pressure of courtly intrigue and whispered fears. What had once been cautious watchfulness now transformed into outright suspicion, a poison seeping through the marble halls and dimly lit chambers of the castle. The prophecy, once a distant shadow, now became the foundation upon which distrust was built, as nobles and courtiers alike questioned the very legitimacy of their young queen. The innocence she once possessed was slipping away, replaced by an acute awareness that her every move, every word, was met with scrutiny and doubt. Marriage, the traditional means to forge alliances and solidify power, became a battlefield where Elera's youth and the prophecy collided. Proposals arrived from distant realms, each bearing promises and veiled threats wrapped in fine silks and ornate rings. Her attempts to weave bonds of peace through diplomacy were met with resistance not only from foreign courts but from the very factions within her own realm. The nobles, whose loyalties were as shifting as the autumn wind, whispered in shadowed alcoves that the prophecy was a curse, one that would only be fulfilled if Elera were allowed to rule unchallenged. They sought to undermine her, to turn marriage into a trap that might break her reign before it truly began. Amid this swirling storm of politics and suspicion, a figure emerged from the shadows, Arden, a trusted confidant whose loyalty was as enigmatic as the shifting tides. To Elera, Arden was a rare source of counsel and companionship, a steady presence in a court rife with deceit. Yet behind his calm demeanor lay ambitions and secrets that no one, not even the queen, could fully discern. Arden's influence grew quietly, his words carefully chosen to fan the flames of fear surrounding the prophecy. He whispered of rebellion, of nobles who would rise to cleanse the kingdom of the curse he claimed Elera embodied. His counsel, at times comforting, at others chilling, sowed seeds of doubt in the queen's heart, blurring the lines between friend and foe. The tension that had simmered beneath the surface erupted violently when an insurrection erupted within the castle walls. One night, under the cloak of darkness, armed rebels surged through the corridors, their faces masked but their purpose clear, to seize the throne and end the reign of the prophesied queen. The coup was swift and brutal, shattering the fragile peace that had held the kingdom together. Elera, caught in the midst of the chaos, narrowly escaped capture by the quick thinking of her loyal retainers. The castle, once a sanctuary, became a battlefield where blood stained the marble floors and the echoes of betrayal rang louder than the clash of steel. The failed uprising left scars deeper than the wounds inflicted by sword and flame. It shattered the illusion of safety, exposing the depths of treachery that lurked within Alara's inner circle. The queen, still young but forced to bear a burden far beyond her years, found herself isolated in a world where trust was a scarce commodity. Every smile concealed a threat, every gesture a potential betrayal. The prophecy, once a distant shadow, now cast a looming presence over her every decision, as if the chaos unfolding was the very fate foretold by the seers. In the aftermath, Alara's resolve was tested as never before. The coup attempt was a brutal lesson in the fragility of power and the cost of naivety. She learned that those closest to her could be the most dangerous adversaries, and that the line between loyalty and treachery was perilously thin. The young queen's innocence was irrevocably lost, replaced by a cautious strategy born of survival. She began to question the motives of all who surrounded her, her once open heart guarded behind a fortress of suspicion. The kingdom itself trembled under the weight of uncertainty. News of the rebellion spread like wildfire, emboldening factions that had long awaited a sign of weakness. Foreign powers, ever watchful, seized upon the turmoil to advance their own claims, sending envoys with veiled threats and promises of support for rival claimants. The fragile alliances Alara had sought to build were tested as doubts about the prophecy's truth multiplied, turning once loyal nobles into potential traitors. The court became a crucible of paranoia, where every whisper could ignite another flame of rebellion. Yet amid the chaos, Alara's spirit remained unbroken. The trials she faced forged her into a leader more cautious and calculating than the child who had first ascended the throne. She began to weave a web of her own, alliances with foreign powers, secret pacts with loyal factions within the realm, and a vigilant watch over her advisors. Her decisions, once tentative, now carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. The queen, who had been marked by prophecy as a bringer of ruin, was transforming into a strategist determined to defy the fate imposed upon her. But this transformation came at a cost. The young queen found herself increasingly isolated, the burden of leadership a heavy cloak she could not shed. The betrayal of her confidant Arden, once suspected and now confirmed, cut deeply, reinforcing the harsh reality that in the Game of Thrones, trust was a rare and precious commodity. The loss of those she had once considered allies left wounds not easily healed, and the loneliness of power settled over her like a winter frost. The prophecy, once a distant murmur, now seemed to echo in every corner of the kingdom. As rebellion simmered and alliances shifted like sand, Alara's grip on the throne was tenuous at best. Yet even as the darkness closed in, the queen's determination to survive and reclaim her authority burned fiercely within her. The struggle was far from over, and the battle for her kingdom, and her very soul, was only just beginning. The kingdom lay fractured, its once unified heart splintered by betrayal and broken trusts. Alara, now tempered by the fires of rebellion and loss, stood resolute amid the ruins of her early reign. The weight of the prophecy still pressed upon her, a relentless shadow that threatened to consume all she sought to build. Yet, beneath the burden, a fierce determination took root, a resolve to reclaim the throne not as a pawn of fate, but as a queen who shaped her own destiny. With the insurrection quelled but the realm far from healed, Alara turned to the delicate art of alliance building, forging bonds where once there had been only suspicion. She reached beyond the castle walls, seeking support from foreign powers whose interests aligned with the fragile stability she craved. Envoys were dispatched under the veil of night, bearing gifts and promises, weaving a network of loyalty that spanned borders. These alliances were not born of trust alone but of shared necessity, a mutual recognition that chaos would serve no kingdom well. Within the realm, Alara's grasp tightened as loyal factions emerged from the shadows. She rewarded those who stood steadfast during the coup's darkest hours, elevating trusted nobles and commanders to positions of influence. These allies became the pillars upon which she rebuilt her court, their loyalty tested and proven through trials that demanded more than mere words. The queen's circle, once rife with deceit, was reshaped into a fortress of cautious camaraderie, each member bound by a common cause, the survival of the realm under Alara's rule. Yet the path to power was stained with sacrifice. The queen's decisions demanded a toll few could bear. Loved ones were lost, Friends turned enemies, lives sacrificed in the brutal calculus of war and politics. Each victory was shadowed by grief, each triumph tempered by the cost it exacted. Alara bore these losses silently, the weight of solitude settling deep within her bones. The prophecy, once a distant threat, now felt like an inescapable fate, pressing down with the cold certainty of an unyielding tide. Ruling alone, Alara became a figure both revered and feared. Her presence was commanding, her gaze sharp and unyielding. Yet beneath the armor of authority lay the quiet ache of isolation. The court whispered of the queen who bore the kingdom's burdens without complaint, who wielded power with a steady hand even as her heart broke in silence. Her strength was a beacon to some, a warning to others, a testament to the harsh realities of leadership in a world where vulnerability was a luxury none could afford. The shadow of the prophecy lingered over every decision, a constant reminder that fate's hand was never far. Alara moved with measured steps, each policy and decree weighed against the possibility of fulfilling the doom foretold at her birth. She sought to unite a kingdom fractured by fear, to build bridges where walls had once stood. Education, justice, and welfare became pillars of her vision, efforts to heal a realm wounded by mistrust and strife. Her rulings blended compassion with pragmatism, a delicate balance crafted to stabilize a world on the brink. But even as she extended her hand to heal, Alara remained vigilant against the ever-present threat of betrayal. Spies and informants moved through the court like ghosts, their loyalties as fickle as the wind. The queen's watchful eyes missed little, her intuition honed by years of deception and loss. Those who plotted in shadows were swiftly uncovered and dealt with, their schemes crushed beneath the iron weight of justice. Yet the cost of maintaining control deepened the solitude that enveloped her, a silent price paid for every act of mercy and every stroke of retribution. In moments stolen from the demands of rule, Alara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The frightened child who had once fled the clutches of rebellion had transformed into a sovereign who wielded power with a fierce, unyielding will. Yet beneath the crown's gleam, she remained painfully aware of the prophecy's shadow, a specter that haunted her steps and whispered of ruin. Her struggle was not only for the kingdom's survival but for her own soul, a battle between destiny and desire, fate and free will. The alliances she forged abroad and the loyalty she nurtured at home were fragile strands in a tapestry constantly threatened by unseen forces. Every decision carried the weight of potential betrayal, every moment of peace a fragile illusion. Yet Alara pressed onward, her resolve unbroken, her vision clear. She would not be the pawn of prophecy she had been destined to become. Instead, she would write her own story, one of resilience, strength, and unyielding hope. Her reign, marked by both triumph and tragedy, became a testament to the complexities of power. The queen who had once been a frightened child now commanded armies and counseled kings, her voice a clarion call for unity in a realm divided. Yet the loneliness of leadership remained her constant companion, a silent shadow cast by the very crown she bore. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the castle lay still and the weight of the world seemed momentarily liftable, Alara allowed herself the briefest sigh, a fleeting release before the demands of the day reclaimed her. The struggle for her kingdom was far from over. The battlefield of politics was ever shifting, and the shadows of betrayal lingered still. But Alara's spirit, forged in the crucible of loss and hardened by the fires of defiance, burned brighter than ever. She stood not as a victim of prophecy but as a queen who dared to defy it, shaping her destiny with every breath, every choice, every act of courage. In the relentless dance between fate and free will, Alara's story unfolded, a tale of power and sacrifice, of loneliness and strength. The kingdom watched and waited, its future balanced on the edge of a blade, as the queen who once seemed destined for ruin rose to claim her place among the legends of the realm. In the waning days of her reign, Alara stood at the precipice of fate, the weight of the prophecy she had long sought to defy pressing down with an unrelenting force. The kingdom, once fractured and battered by rebellion and betrayal, teetered on the edge of final collapse as enemies both within and beyond its borders closed in. The fragile alliances she had painstakingly forged began to unravel, and whispers of dissent grew louder, echoing through the halls that had witnessed her rise and relentless struggle. The shadows of the past converged upon her, carrying the heavy promise of doom that had been foretold at her birth. The final storm came not with the roar of armies alone, but with the sting of treachery from the closest of quarters. A trusted advisor, whose loyalty had once seemed unshakable, turned against her in a moment of desperation and ambition. The betrayal was swift and brutal, a calculated strike that shattered the fragile peace and ignited a battle that would seal the kingdom's fate. Elara faced the enemy not only on the field but within the very heart of her court, where trust had become a scarce and dangerous commodity. In the chaos of the final confrontation, Elara fought with the fierce courage that had defined her reign. Her sword, once a symbol of youthful hope, now moved with the steady precision of a seasoned ruler determined to protect her people to the last breath. Yet the tide of fate was merciless. Surrounded by foes and betrayed by those she held dear, the queen's strength waned beneath the relentless onslaught. Her death, whether by the blade of an enemy or the poison of deceit, became the final act in the prophecy's grim narrative, a tragic fulfillment that seemed to confirm the seer's darkest visions. Yet, in the shadow of destruction, a paradox emerged. The ruin Elara had sought to prevent became the crucible for renewal. Her courage and vision, though unable to save her life, ignited a spark within the hearts of those who survived. The kingdom, battered but unbroken, began the slow and arduous process of rebuilding. Tales of the young queen who had dared to challenge fate spread far beyond the castle walls, inspiring a new generation to rise from the ashes of despair. Elara's legacy was a tapestry woven with threads of both failure and hope. Her inability to prevent the kingdom's devastation did not erase the profound impact of her leadership, the resilience she embodied, the alliances she forged, and the vision she held for a better future. The prophecy, once seen solely as a curse, revealed itself as a catalyst for change, a harsh but necessary tempest that cleared the way for transformation. In death, Elara became more than a queen. She became a symbol of endurance and the enduring spirit of a people determined to survive. The kingdom's slow recovery was marked by reverence for Elara's memory. Monuments rose in her honor, and stories of her defiance and strength were passed down through generations. Her name became a beacon, reminding all who heard it that even in the darkest moments, there was a flicker of light, an unyielding spirit that could not be extinguished by fate or betrayal. The prophecy's shadow lingered, a reminder of the past, but it no longer dictated the future. As the realm healed, leaders emerged who drew upon Elara's example, striving to unite the kingdom and restore its former glory. The lessons of her reign, of resilience in the face of despair, of courage amidst betrayal, became guiding principles for those who sought to build a better world. The memory of the young queen who bore the crown with both grace and defiance became a cornerstone of the kingdom's identity, a testament to the enduring power of agency amidst the forces that sought to control it. The story of Elara, from the fearful child born under a dark prophecy to the queen who fought to shape her own destiny, lived on as both a warning and an inspiration. Her journey encapsulated the complexities of survival in a world ruled by fate and ambition, a tale of love and loss, hope and despair. Though her life ended in tragedy, the spirit she ignited continued to burn brightly, a flame that guided the kingdom through its darkest hours and into a future shaped by those who dared to defy the shadows. In the quiet moments that followed her passing, the castle that had been both cradle and crucible for Elara's reign stood as a silent witness to the enduring legacy of a queen who, despite the prophecy, refused to be defined by it. Her story was etched into the very stones of the realm, a timeless reminder that even in the face of inevitable ruin, the human spirit holds the power to inspire change, to endure, and ultimately, to transcend the bounds of destiny.